Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to probably the biggest ever SkySwitch webinar in history. It is amazing the number of signups we have for today's topic, which is all about the Microsoft Teams connector and how it integrates so elegantly, so nicely, so perfectly for all SkySwitch resellers and why we've made it easier for it to work. You see, the whole idea around the Microsoft Teams connector is to make it easier for you to connect your customers to the Microsoft Teams platform with the SkySwitch platform. So we have to tell you that the SkySwitch engineering team and development team have been working for months very diligently behind the scenes to ensure that you, our resellers, really have great access to the best of all telecom solutions available. As a result of all this hard work, we're really excited to announce that SkySwitch has made connecting with Microsoft Teams fast and easy to deploy with the new SkySwitch Teams connector. We also wanted to make sure our resellers fully understand the way the SkySwitch Teams connector works and how the integration is so functional. I'm Andy Abramson. I'm from SkySwitch. I'm going to be joined by our good friend, probably the unsung hero inside the SkySwitch executive team, Corey Stoker, who's our VP of support. Many of you know Corey. This is really, I'm going to call it Corey Recognition and Appreciation Day, because Corey has done yeoman-like work to make this happen and bring the SkySwitch Teams connector to the forefront. We're also joined by Micah Singer, the Managing Director of Teammate Technology, who we worked with to deploy the API that makes this such an elegant and easy to use solution versus everything else that's out there. And we're going to talk all about that and all the intricacies that make the Teams connector so good. What are we going to cover this week? Well, we're going to cover what the Teams connector really is exactly, who this app is right for, because candidly, it's not right for everybody. What are some of the benefits for you to be selling Teams with our PBX integration with SkySwitch? Well, for starters, it makes you money. And there's also some risks of introducing Teams calling with PBX integration because there's some hurdles to do it. It's not a one size fits all solution that's out there, but because of what we've done with Corey and Micah, we've made it easy and better for you. And lastly, we're going to talk about all the documentation and setup information, and as well as getting you started. So without further ado, you guys know who I am. You don't need to know my background, but let's talk a little bit about Corey. Corey's been in the voice over IP industry for, about 11 years. He's been in IT management. He leads our support team, and he really optimizes support department to make it work great. Corey believes that support must be attacked from every angle. It's not just about solving trouble tickets and resolving issues, but really it's about preventive medicine, identifying the trends, continual employee development, training, documentation, customer education. Corey's done it all. So Corey's got a bunch of employees who help him. We've grown from 5 people who started working with him to now 32. He's built a continually developing training program, and he allows the support personnel to really train by reading, watching videos, and all that. So that's Corey. And then Micah Singer. Well, Micah's been a technology disruptor for years. He's been on the webinars with us before, just like Corey. He founded VoIP Logic and then sold it to BroadSoft in 2016, which of course now is owned by Cisco. Before that, he was the VP of Business Development at Justice Technology and founded Omni Access. He's a graduate of Williams College. And when he's not busy coming up with great technology solutions, you can find him riding up and down the hills as he's an avid cyclist. And with that, let me turn it over to the person we're recognizing and appreciating today, Corey Stoker.
Hey, thanks, Andy. Appreciate it. So we're going to be looking at the Teams connector today, and I want to go through the ups and downs of the Teams connector so you know if this product is right for you or not. And I think there's a lot of questions to be answered as for who's the target audience. Does this interrupt my current sales? Does it give me new customers? And hopefully we can answer all that today, plus show you what the application does. So the Teams connector is a third-party application which is powered by Teammate, and that's Micah's company. But we integrated Teammate with our API to make it easy and simple for you to integrate Microsoft Teams. And it essentially turns Microsoft Teams into a soft phone. And it's kind of a basic soft phone, but you get some added functionality within the Teams application, such as portal access. So one thing that I want to spell out about the Teams connector is it is fully brandable to almost to a flaw. You can brand everything from the portal to the emails that go out to the customer, to the knowledge base. And from start to finish, you can give your customer an experience that makes it look like your product completely, which is very important, obviously, in our business.
So Corey, the Teams connector works. Does it replace the Reach UC soft phone, or does it just work alongside of it?
It can do either one. So it does work, as you can see on the page here. You can install it on, you can install Teams itself on iPhone or Android. And if you do the setup on your PC, or Teams is connected, and you sign in with that account, your PBX soft phone will automatically integrate over. So you can use it instead of Reach UC. It's, I would say, a little bit more featureless, but you get calling capabilities through the PBX with Teams. So you're also getting, you get voicemail control. So you can do voicemail independently in Teams. You can turn that off. In fact, we typically would recommend you turn it off. Get music on hold, some just really basic functionality, dial in, dial out, extension dialing, and so on. Now you also get an activity feed, you get the voicemail, you get line status, so you get some BLF for your line, you get live calls. And one thing we wanted to cover here is SMS. It's just not ready yet, and don't really have any kind of ETA. It's something that we've looked at with Micah, but I don't think we even have any kind of timelines to give you at this point.
Now, is that a function of what we're doing on our side, on our soft switch, or is that a function of how Teams functions with SMS?
So there's two parts of it. We have actually an SMS API, which is not published. It's out there, and I believe Mike has taken a look at it. But the Teams API is pretty much evolving very rapidly, and maybe Micah can answer why. But
yeah, no,
are,
absolutely. If you guys can hear me, I'll just help answer that one. We have this in deployment, and this is really a combination of what SkySwitch has built. You know, the delivery and the business features around SMS. Teams is just the recipient and the sending point. So we actually have that in development actively. I wouldn't give a timeline either, but it's probably 3 months until it's in beta, and then you'll decide when it's up to the standards to go live. But it will be just to let that SMS follow you into Teams like phone calls do.
Right, and we're just trying to heat off questions before they come in, because SMS is obviously going to be a natural fit into the chat window inside of the Teams application.
What are some advanced features here, you know, how that it works? Because there's a lot you can do with Microsoft Teams with, you know, whether it's DTMF, whether it's soft keys. How have we implemented this, and what does it let you do?
Yeah, so you'll get the native Teams dialing. You can do DTMF within a call, and as you see on the screen here, there's some PBX management features, which are essentially feature codes. You see call park and other things on the screen. That's actually not fully functioning. You cannot do in-call controls with these particular buttons, but you can still do them with the DTMF that's presented on your soft phone. With these feature codes, you can launch feature codes that are for pre-call, such as agent login, log out, things like that, where you give your agent, your call center agent, a simple button to hit. Oh, apologize for that. I did not get my phone on silent. So you get your feature codes for your agents to log in or log out, and so on. Anything that is pre-call via a star code can be managed from here. You also get a reflection of the star codes entered in the chat portal. I think we missed a slide. Yet there we go. So one of my favorite features is you get the PBX portal embedded into Microsoft Teams. So this gives you a lot of power depending on the user status. And if you want to present this to your user, you're going to be able to show them the PBX portal, and all the functionality from the PBX portal is integrated into Teams itself, which just makes it really easy for your customer to manage answering rules or manage their call queues or anything such as that. Anything you can do from the portal is easily achieved from within Teams itself.
So everything lives within the Teams environment, and you're able to do or manage both your Teams interactions and your regular PBX interactions all within a single interface.
Exactly. And one of the questions that I see here, I know Andy is going to talk about questions, but during the beta, only basic users could be added. Has this been updated to allow all user licenses to be set up in the Teams connector? And the answer is yes, you can use everything up to an Office Manager. What it does is it uses the masquerade functionality within our PBX. So when you're provisioning your user account, your domain, we can set up a reseller level user, and then you can masquerade any role under that reseller.
Corey, one of the things I want to talk about, so everybody knows, please post your questions in the Q&A, not the chat. If you're out there, you've got some questions. Somebody asked a question about integrating into Teams. Does it take away any of the features of Teams when you do the integration?
It does actually replace the calling functionality for Teams. So you can only have one or the other. You can't have both Teams routing as well as SkySwitch routing. So it's a full replacement for the soft phone inside of Teams.
Okay. Why don't we talk a little about how it all works, because it's not as simple as just, oh, gee, we made it simple with the API, but there's a lot of heavy lifting that's going on behind the scenes. How's it work architecturally?
Yeah, can you hear me all right, Andy? Is it?
You can.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, this is just to take a look under the hood. So this slide, everything that all the interactions with Microsoft and the PBX and SkySwitch that we're doing with Teammate technology is sitting in Azure Cloud and in multiple locations, and ultimately it's comprised of, say, three components. One is the media path, so it's from the same SkySwitch platform you're using today through a gateway SBC into Microsoft Teams. Makes sense to choose a gateway that's near the customer. So US East, US West, I think will be the two that are prominent in this crowd. And then what we're also doing is maintaining registration and subscription. Some of the features that Corey was showing you are based on getting the standard, turning Teams into a soft phone means it has to act like a soft phone, and that's what we're mimicking with the Teammate connector. The third part is really the provisioning. It's what's happening on the Microsoft side. So the interfaces, this branding portal, and the other places you build your business customers. We're talking into scripting into PowerShell, pretty complex at this point. And then and PowerShell's old technology. It's a lot of people know it. And then using extensively with this Graph API, which is relatively new. And that's how we build the Teams app, and how you show your businesses, their end users portals, and so forth. And you can pass real-time information to the user in different parts of Teams, like activity feed, so you get a banner pop up on your cell phone, things people are used to. So on the other side, this is SkySwitch domain, but PBX's trunks. the underpinning technology is direct routing. It's using direct routing, which is in the media all the time these days. So we're leveraging that.
Right, and you can get direct routing in different ways, but it doesn't give you near the functionality that Teammate will give you. Essentially, you get another PBX user in your phones tab where Teammate is registered, and all of the functionality of the PBX can essentially be integrated into pre-call for that user, so you can still go through auto attendance and routing users and all that.
Yeah. Flip to the next slide. I think some of those questions are answered as well.
So it's really important that everybody understands that there's the native integration, and then there's what we've done to make Teams Connector work more elegantly and for the interface to be more simplified so resellers can get this up and running for their customers. Can you explain
Right.
that?
It's a very simple process to go through this setup, and we'll show a little bit of that during this presentation, but we have documents and videos to show a little bit more.
Yeah, so on this slide, I mean, this is some of what you guys we've just been talking about, but the on the left, it's sort of the steps you would go through if you want to use direct routing, which any Microsoft business can use that as if they buy the right licenses and so forth, and they understand that they have an SBC, they've set up the infrastructure essentially. On the right, what SkySwitch has done with the Teams connector is create something, basically the workflows for anyone who wants to sell this to businesses. So it does, the second bullet point is Microsoft Direct Routing again, but it's the ease of provisioning, management, and resale, and the branding is really key. And what we've done is support the individual SIP user registration. So it's still the same PBX, and I mean that question comes up a lot. And maybe a question back for you, Corey, is this is a +1 soft phone, so you can whatever soft phone or hard phones you're using today, this can be supported on top of that, or is it a replacement? Yeah.
It fits into the user seat. So as most of you know, you can have up to 10 devices under an individual user seat. And this could be just one of those devices.
So yeah, I mean, it's the idea behind Teammates technology is to turn Microsoft Teams into just another soft phone, but the place where people are working, and and there's positives and negatives to it, which I think we're going to go through, but it seems to be in some demand.
Yeah, so we want to answer who this app is for and who this app isn't for, because there's a lot of things to think about when you're thinking about selling Microsoft products. So who this app is really for is if you're already someone who's reselling Microsoft products. So if you're already reselling Office 365 or Microsoft 365, this is going to fit in very well for you. Now, we also ask if you're already familiar with Microsoft, and this is more around the Microsoft admin console, because there's a good chance that you're going to have to do some walkthroughs and support for the Microsoft admin console for your end users. If they have their own Microsoft tenant and you're just integrating in, you're probably going to have to do at least a little bit of walkthrough with that individual. And that brings us to the global admin dilemma. One thing that is kind of different about Teams and Teammate is we need to have permissions to be able to write into the PowerShell with API, and we need to be able to make administrative changes into the Microsoft admin console. So you have to get the global admin involved. So if this is you, if you're the reseller, the MSP that is provisioning Microsoft, and you can just add yourself as a global admin for a day, and that makes it very simple. But if you're working with a company that is not your customer, you are going to have to be the one that walks the tech or the administrator through setting up the application, because they inside of the teammate portal, they're going to have to be the ones provisioning users, setting up the direct routing, just because they have the permissions to do so within the Microsoft admin console.
What are some of the benefits that you see for our resellers by selling Teams integration? We have a lot of questions that are starting to come around this one in the Q&A. And why do you see this as a big plus for our resellers?
I personally see it as a different market that you can tap into. So there's already a lot of businesses that are using Teams and using Teams for collaboration. A lot of those businesses don't have a phone system or have a traditional phone system, so they're just starting to get into Teams. You can present many more features than Microsoft themselves. So you can do a combination of a desk phone and the Teams application with all the auto attendance and call queues and all that stuff on top. So you're also going to be looking at small businesses that are just starting to integrate with Teams. That gives you a big potential new customer where you can present other options that maybe your competitors can't. And then for your current customers that are starting to use Teams as a collaboration tool, this is a great add-on.
What are some of the risk factors? What should resellers be aware of that they need to be able to counsel their customers about? Because this isn't just something for everybody, and it doesn't necessarily meet everybody's needs, though it sounds really cool. What are some of those risks, Corey?
Right. So this is one of the parts that I make sure to talk about on every phone call that we've had with our beta users. And that's there's a few points to this. One is there's going to be a Microsoft license add-on that's on top of the normal Office 365 licensing. And that add-on is roughly $8. They have higher versions, but the $8 phone system licensing is a requirement just to get the dialing functionality within Teams. So Microsoft is collecting an $8 toll. You're getting the user seat, you're getting the DIDs, you're getting the call routing, you're able to mark all that up, but you're also competing with Microsoft's unlimited domestic $15 to $20 calling plans. So you don't have to necessarily match their prices because you can offer much more features than Microsoft can, but it is something to be aware of. Now, one thing that everyone should be careful of is introducing Teams to a company that isn't using it already. So if you have a customer that is not even aware that Teams can do calls and you introduce it as a collaboration tool and it replaces their phone on a desk solution, you're potentially shrinking your margins. So something to be aware of there. Now, we've written some documentation, but one thing during the setup process and one thing that we have to compliment Micah's team on is their documentation is very thorough and covers a lot. So within our documentation, we kind of put together a step-by-step guide of how to use Teammate setup Teammate, also utilizing Teammate's documentation. So there's a little bit of a mix where we do a walkthrough of how to set it up, and it links constantly back to Teammate's documentation. So we have inside of docs.skyswitch.com, you'll find a reseller resource guide that includes how to get started and the entire setup process from start to finish.
When everyone's doing the setup, where does the SkySwitch support team efforts come in where does Teammate Technology come in, and where does Microsoft come in?
Yeah, this is one thing that we want to make really clear, because our support team are a bunch of network guys and phone guys. We don't have any kind of Microsoft expertise. So we're expecting you, the reseller, to be familiar with Microsoft, and for you to be able to walk through or walk your customer through any kind of troubleshooting with the Microsoft setup. Now, what we can do is essentially point you to the exact issue. So if you do run into a problem in the Microsoft setup process, say you're missing a specific feature in the Microsoft admin console that's required for provisioning, we can point you to what that feature is, or give you a log, or even provide a document from Teammate's document knowledge base, and give you a directed path to solving the issue. But our team will not go into your admin console on the Microsoft side and do any kind of troubleshooting there. We will fully support the soft phone functionality of the app. So to us, the device registers under the user seat. It looks like any other soft phone. We can look at call quality, registration issues, call issues, anything like that.
That really helps to define it, because you're paying SkySwitch for your SkySwitch service. You're paying Microsoft for the $8 a month licensing fee. So what you're saying is, if you've got a problem with Microsoft, go to Microsoft.
Right. Yeah, and we want you to be familiar with Teams itself, so you can support Teams itself with the basic questions. It's just something that we won't get involved in. If there's some error with the Teammate app, or some bug or issue with the Teammate app, then we would escalate to Teammate. But anything within Microsoft is going to be back on you, the reseller, or the end customer.
Have we heard of any difficulties when people contact Microsoft support for things that are issues related to it from the Microsoft side? Because the last thing we ever want to do is get into one of these he said, she said, finger pointing situations.
Right, and actually during my setup process, Micah knows this pretty well. I had two issues on two different domains, two completely separate issues that ended up being Microsoft issues, and had to go through the path of dealing with Microsoft support. It was a more pleasant experience than I expected, but it was also not the easiest thing, because I've been out of the Microsoft world for 10 years or so.
What is some recommendations that you would have, Corey, based on that, on how to address the Microsoft support team, and what are some of the common issues that resellers might experience that you, through your guidance, can give them some advice on what to say, what to ask for, who to ask for?
Yeah, so first off, most of the problems that you're going to run into are going to be well documented inside of Teammate's knowledge base. And you can simply look at the article and follow the step-by-step guide to correct the issue. We've done most of the running into problems for you. So just about everything's cleared up, and it should be a simple, easy process to provision in the first place. If you do have to contact Microsoft support, everything generates a log. So you're going to want to start by finding the log that's generated, and then contact Microsoft specifically through that log, like in the Azure Active Directory. If you have a login error, you can generate a ticket right from that screen.
Yeah, I would say one other common issue is variable propagation speeds in Microsoft. So that generates a lot. We see that more broadly at Teammate, a lot of tickets based on unpredictability from Microsoft's provisioning, PowerShell mainly. So that can, and that's a frustrating one because it's variable.
So usually in workflows, you build in some time lags to make sure licenses are provisioned and things happen. And
Right. I've
yeah.
been telling people that you want to wait 24 hours after any change in Microsoft to be sure it's fully propagated and available to a third-party application. And not all cases is that true, but it's kind of a good general rule of thumb.
Do it on the weekend. That's that's usually the best way. I mean, it's lower load. I mean, it feels like it's directly related to the success of teams. Just a lot of people doing provisioning. But yeah, those. Be specific with when you open a ticket with Microsoft, and yeah, and generally Corey's been really helpful in finding some issues that we've documented. So it's ongoing.
They all find me is the problem.
Yeah, no, and so but that's how they get documented. It's just been a large pool of users reporting.
Now, Corey, you've pretty much worked the entire support team to be able to become familiar with this. But do we have a dedicated group of people who are working with Micah to keep this up and running at an optimum experience, or can any of our support people handle it?
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing to talk about because our processes have changed as we've grown to be a bigger company. We have a product engineer named Fareed who helped with a lot of the integration. So between myself and Fareed, we did the beta testing with a number of resellers. We did a lot of the setup and really helped define the processes. About a month ago, we started to introduce the product to our top tier of support. So all of the support that you'll receive in the beginning is going to be by our tier 3 technicians. They're most familiar with it, but they're also pretty agile and able to help you solve issues that they haven't seen before. So everything is going to be kind of like a trickle down process. That's how we do a lot of our internal education. We want our tier 3 to be comfortable with the application and how to use the application and the back end, so they can pass it down to tier 2, but also when tier 2 has to escalate back up to tier 3, they're very familiar with it.
Let's keep going because I see we're starting to pile up with questions. So why don't we keep moving through the slides, and hopefully a lot of the questions that are already coming in will get answered as we keep going through them.
Yeah, we're actually pretty much at the end of the slide, so we can start jumping into questions.
Hit mute by mistake. Okay, let me go back into the questions. So Jeff Scott asked, will this replace Microsoft audio conferencing by including a SkySwitch conference number?
So you can use the SkySwitch conference bridge. I'm not very familiar with the native audio conferencing within Teams itself, but by including a SkySwitch conference bridge, you can direct dial from Microsoft into the bridge, and your users can dial in from the PSTN, or your end customers can dial in from the PSTN.
Neil Arwood wants to know what's the best use case for teammates.
Oh, Michael, were you going to add something onto that?
I was going to say that audio conferencing is a separate license in Microsoft's licensing structure. So it's definitely a good question but there's an interplay. So it's good to test it out with someone who has an audio conferencing license. That user has audio conference, and one who does not, to see the behavior if audio conferencing is something that's in demand and it's going to be used by the customers.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so use cases are really for your customers who want to continue using Teams, maybe doesn't want to add a different soft phone application. People that are already using Teams, again, are pretty much the target audience.
And on that one, we've seen a broad interest for lots of different reasons, primarily remote workers who don't want to carry a phone around and already use Teams. I think that's I think there's enough out there in the world now that a lot of people using Teams, this makes sense to just put it right there. I assume people who travel a lot and want to use, who use Teams mobile application, it's really nice to have the phone, and you can use a separate app on your phone, but if you're already using the Teams app, it's right there with it. Those have been the two main use cases I've seen.
Mark Rowe has probably the elephant in the room question. He wants to know what the best way is to market our product to a prospect, and he says the prospect might ask the question, why wouldn't we just use our Teams infrastructure with a Microsoft calling plan and thus avoid the need for this type of integration with SkySwitch?
Yeah, and that's kind of the danger of marketing this product broadly. You can offer additional functionality on top of what Microsoft offers, but you do run the risk of introducing them to something they didn't know about, which is that Microsoft offers calling as well. So it's something to be careful with, and just tread lightly.
This is really Microsoft's Trojan horse strategy. They will get people onto their platform, and then they will slowly add them to more services and more features. And that's been their stock and trade for many years. Ryan Greer asks, does using Teams require any special entitlements for the user in SkySwitch?
So it doesn't require any entitlements, but there is a licensing cost for the Teammate application, which you can find inside of your SkySwitch dashboard or by talking to your salesperson.
Chris Laney wants to know, will it function as smoothly on Wi-Fi as it does on mobile data? He says ReachUC has some issues receiving calls on Wi-Fi.
One is we'd kind of like to look into the issues for ReachUC on Wi-Fi, because it shouldn't have issues. But two is it pretty much acts like the Microsoft Teams application itself. So you're doing Teams directly to the Teammate SBC, and you're going to have the same level of functionality as you would with Teams itself going out to Microsoft.
Neil Arwood asks, just to clarify use case, where does Teammate add the most value to existing SkySwitch users? What we're really saying is, where does the Teams connector add the most value?
Yeah, I see some of the use cases that we've been presented with have been like a small user base within a corporation or small to medium business, use Teams and also operate like a call center. So migrating a chunk of those users over to Teams allows them to not look elsewhere for phone plans that work with Teams.
David Busey asks, and we sort of went over this, but I think it'll be good to reiterate it, Corey. Which Microsoft licenses are needed? Does it have to be E or a series? And what about small, medium business licenses like Essential and Standard? And I think he's referring to the Office 365 licenses that include some access to Teams.
Yeah, that's great. Inside of our documentation, you'll find a link to Teammates documentation. There's a spreadsheet that tells you exactly which licenses you need. And you can use E licenses, A, F, all those different variations of Microsoft licenses, as well as some of the like essential or standard business licenses. The important thing is there's going to be that phone system add-on that's required in every case except for like an E5 where you have all the features already.
Anthony Goss asked the question, do video calls work as well on the desktop or mobile app?
So that's actually a good question. Video calls wouldn't go through us. And that's a little bit outside of my knowledge on the Teams product, but I think within Teams you're still going to use the Teams functionality for video to video, and through us it's just going to be the voice side.
Yeah, one of the primary uses of Teams is for video conferencing. So a lot of customers will already be using that.
He also wants to know, will the end user automatically log into Teams with their domain credentials, or will they need a separate credential?
Yeah, so in the setup process, as you go through the teammate portal, and as your global admin helps with the setup, you're going to associate your users with the Teams user. So your PBX users get associated with the Teams user at that point. Then when the end user themselves log in, they're set up and good to go. They don't have to do anything else. They would just use their normal Teams login, and they have their calling functionality. So no additional functionality or no additional passwords. They don't need another SkySwitch password or anything like that.
Umesh Patel wants to know about auto attendance and how that plays into the whole Teams connector concept.
Yeah, because these show up as user devices under a user seat, your PBX functionality is the same. So inside of your PBX portal, you can use auto attendance and call queues and so on, and then just route the call towards the Teams user.
There's a lot of questions coming in from Robert Harney, from Denside Medina Sotolongo, all around costs. Corey, you want to talk about how we're handling costs and pricing and things like that?
Yeah, so the cost, if you're comparing directly with Microsoft's cost for domestic calling, come pretty close where you don't have a whole lot of margin. And that's where we say Microsoft has a pretty hefty toll. That $8 toll is really revenue that they're kind of taking away from you. And that's just how I look at it as a technical person. But it's something that you have to weigh into it, because if you feel like you can't sell your customer on a higher price because Microsoft is offering a lower price, and you want to offer your same pricing, that's just coming out of your margins. So that's one challenge to it. But you also have to ask yourself, if the customer is already going to Microsoft, or the customer is already starting to use Teams, is it something you can throw in as an add-on for some users or supplement your existing products?
So related to that, Dale Morgan said he doesn't see pricing in our MSA. Dale, we want you to contact your SkySwitch sales representative, because we know there's going to be different scenarios in quantities, in licensing, etc. So rather than just say what the price is, we want you to work through this with your SkySwitch representative.
Yeah, and there's a starting price, and it's not always a great idea to talk about pricing on a webinar that might be watched 6 months down the road, and the pricing might be lower or higher. There's also pricing tiers. So depending on the number of users you have, you'll start to drop down in pricing.
Phil Ciancimino said, so are there any charges for the teammate connector on the SkySwitch end or from teammate?
Yeah, so we're just passing through the teammate licensing cost itself. And again, you can get more about that from either your dashboard or from your salesperson.
Dale Morgan says he attends several Teams meetings each week. Would the connector allow me to move the audio from the computer to my phone?
No, there are dial-in options from within Teams. So you could still dial in to those meetings, but your normal Teams meetings are still going to use Teams audio.
Right.
There was an announcement, I think, at Ignite, and Microsoft showed some really cool ways to do exactly that. Move your phone, the call easily. The answer to that is yes. If Microsoft allows you to do it, you can move that audio stream from your mobile to wherever another instance of Teams.
What you're saying is that to Microsoft, a Teams endpoint is a Teams endpoint regardless of platform.
Yeah, I mean, so this is the advantage of the $8. Maybe, I mean, this is native. This works like anything you see Microsoft selling or mentioning in Ignite that has to do with this. You can use it.
Another question from Nathan Parks. He was think, he says, I think the question that Jeff Scott was driving at about Microsoft audio conferencing is, can a conference call on SkySwitch be linked to a Teams conference call or a video call, thus allowing us to replace the Microsoft audio conferencing license with a SkySwitch conference bridge license?
No, they, at least at this time, that's not something that's possible.
Okay.
That's definitely something we can look into, though. I'm not sure if Mike has looked into replacing the Microsoft audio for their conferencing bridges, but
I have, yeah, because I've been asked. It's in flux right now. I think they're allowing you to do it on certain license types that are generally where they're required, like government GCC licenses or high security, where the audio stream has to stay on their conference bridge. But I haven't seen it rolled out. This idea of a separate audio conferencing gateway is what they call it in PowerShell. Haven't seen that rolled out generally. So maybe in the future, if Microsoft rolls that out generally, this will be possible.
Greg O'Neill has a similar question. I think we've answered it regarding Microsoft audio conferencing, SkySwitch conferencing bridge. So we'll skip over that one. John Camello, to help understand how best to compete in a scenario where companies are thinking of only using Microsoft Teams phone service, are they able to have IP phones connected to their services, or must the user only use the Team mobile app? He wants to be, I think the question there is, are the companies still using, hard phones, desk phones? Is that a competitive differentiator versus only going software?
Go ahead, Micah.
I was gonna say there are Microsoft hard phones as well.
Right. Yeah, and you should be aware that Yealink and Polycom and a lot of these big manufacturers are producing phones directly for Microsoft. So you have Teams versions of these phones. So it's another thing to be aware of if you're trying to compete based on pricing instead of service.
Well, and then the anonymous viewer asks, SkySwitch seat plus Teams integration license and MS license add-on dialer, all in maybe a $14 total, or is it more? And I think again, when Corey's question there, or answer there was, let's contact your rep and go through it, because pricing will change based on volume, based on use case. It's not a one size fits all answer. Fred Block, when can we delete the direct routing user, the one we aren't supposed to delete after we have things up and running? I guess he's showing up data.
Yeah, that's a great question that kind of goes with someone who's already set it up. When you're setting up Teammate, there's a requirement that you have one additional license, so one additional phone system license plus whatever, like if you're using like an E3 license, you have to have one additional of those during the setup process. And that's because the user that Teammate creates to run all of the API integration on the Microsoft side requires the licensing. So after your direct routing is set up, you're done, and you need to leave the user, but you can deprovision those licenses and use them elsewhere.
Al Fahimi says, I got in late, so Teammate replaces the $12 phone services. No, that's not exactly what happens. This is so everyone understands what the Teams connector is. It's a way to bridge the two services together so that your users have a common interface, additional functionality, and a broader range of services, because we know a lot of your customers are living in Microsoft land. They're using Teams for conference calling on a daily basis. They're using it for chat. This is a way to literally connect the two services together. Everyone seems to, Corey, I think we're gonna actually have to do a webinar just on audio conferencing, because everyone's asking the same question over and over and over again. Can you further explain the Microsoft audio conferencing integrating with SkySwitch Conference Bridge? Can you explain how we would test it? I think this is, Corey's gone through this, a couple of times here in the webinar. Why don't you, Corey, think about how we can work with our resellers to better understand this through perhaps a diagram, or perhaps a maybe even a mini webinar or something within SkySwitch University?
Sure. And I think for right now, the answer is you would require those special types of licensing that Mike had talked about. But Microsoft is always changing around how they operate and what they do, what they allow you to do. So there's always a possibility that something may change in the future.
Yeah, that seems to be the biggest question today, is all around the conferencing feature. And I think that, Micah, maybe you built Teammate Technology. You really worked with our team to get the Teams connector up and running. Why don't you just give a quick 30-second summary as to what this does and why this is beneficial for a reseller?
What audio conferencing does specifically,
No,
or?
no, what the Teams connector does, just so, because everyone seems to be getting hung up on audio conferencing, and I think the Teams connector is more than just about doing an audio conference.
I'm always bad at answering this question. Why it's beneficial for a reseller, because they have a lot of customers who are using Microsoft Teams, and they've seen that light. They're usually power users. They're using 2 or 3 functions like that: video conferencing, or maybe audio conferencing, file sharing, chat, and the phone's a logical thing to add on. It's a new desktop. And Microsoft is selling it as such. It's the workplace for the white collar worker, the knowledge worker. So generally that's all true. I mean, everyone has a specific niche they sell into, a geography. The things to keep in mind are Microsoft Teams is, really popular, but it's really, really popular in the US. We're the big market. We're about 60%, 65% of Teams adoption. People want to call from Teams. Some of the stats that they announced at Ignite a week or 2 ago were, 4 times as many people are paying for that phone system license now as they were a year ago. It's probably a huge number, but small for Microsoft standards. So there's a lot of growth coming. 11 times as many calls took place on, not on audio, not conferencing, but on actually phone calls using, something like this or some kind of direct routing. So it's just, there's a lot of demand in certain client types that I think everyone on this call runs into.
So what I'm hearing is that people are living in Teams for their internal workflow, their conferences, so they bring in somebody from the outside for a video conference, but there's a point in time where you've got to have a phone call. And because we already have the phone system that the businesses are using, we're able to make it so that there's this standard interface and standard endpoint, meaning the soft phone, that works with both. And also it gives them one more way to stay in touch with somebody as you elevate from a messaging chat session within Teams to go to a phone call. I think that's a natural progression in user behavior, but also as we see behavior shifting from that phone call to the Teams conferencing platform, this provides, again, a simplified way of staying connected.
Absolutely.
So we've gone through all the questions, which was great. And we actually did this in 53 minutes, which honestly, I thought we might go longer. Corey, any final thoughts you have on the overall experience coming from the very start of beta to what we now have live?
It's just become so polished, and Mike has really listened. Mike's team has listened to a lot of our feedback and has implemented the changes that we've requested. There's still a little bit more to come, but the app has become very polished and easy to use. So very happy to say that.
Well, I think I met many people on this call if they were attending the Vectors. I guess it was the last Vectors.
Yeah.
Which was now about 1.5 years ago. It's exciting to be on, these calls and hear you say that, Corey, after, sort of at that point we were in development, and a lot of this technology is from Microsoft has actually been released from beta to general availability in those last 1.5 years as well. So it's exciting to see the interest in the market and to have been, so long working with SkySwitch and getting your guidance on what works. I think I think there's some unique features that favor you because you've been a test platform in terms of the integrations and the things that I think will work specifically for your resellers. So hopefully that plays out like we think.
Micah, what do you see coming down the pike from Microsoft in Teams that's going to be more compelling for businesses to want to add it? And as a result, the Teams connector is a big supporting part of that addition. What are you hearing Microsoft might be releasing?
So one thing I was watching really closely for at Ignite was, what they're doing with PBX functionality, because that's top of mind to all of us on this call. So, every customer who's using Teams today knows about the Teams PBX, that one of the risk factors that Corey mentioned, and they've probably vetted it and it doesn't meet their what they want. So, I think whatever Microsoft, unless they sort of enhance that, they won't all of a sudden be a better PBX. So I'm not hearing that, which is good. That means there's less of a push into PBX as other things. Some of the features, I thought that I agreed with the question that was about the transfer, the call transfer, seamless transfer. I think that's something cool coming out from Microsoft. I recommend watching, there's one video a year where they announce a lot of this at Ignite. It's about a half-hour video, which I can provide a link to after the call, to get a sense of what they say they're going to do. But also a lot of the focus has been on SIP trunking. So a lot, so selling, they're trying to make it easy to use that soft phone as a SIP trunk endpoint in Teams. But what we're talking about here is not that. It's the PBX functionality. And so customers that using your existing PBX is important. It's everyone's not ripping everything out and changing it all at once. Teams and phone system, maybe some are, but larger companies tend not to. So I think continuity, it's really important to have this kind of connector to make it easy to start working where you want with the technology you want to work with, the PBX and Teams.
And Corey, any last thoughts you have on how our resellers can learn more about the Teams connector, discover more about it? What resources have we given them that makes it easy for them to understand this?
Yeah, our documentation is a great place to start. It tells you how to get started, how to do the setup. There's also a video in there that gives you kind of a preview of what the application does, and you can actually see it working. There's also going to be a setup video by the end of the day available in our documentation as well.
Okay, well, this has been a very good webinar. This has been, I think, super informative. Oh, we got a couple more questions. Keep in mind, Teams does not support intercom paging user to user. With integration and a desk phone, can they have that back?
That's intercom paging. I don't think so. So I think you're talking about just like a star 50 type page extension to extension, and the answer is going to be no for that, because they don't support the SIP headers. But if you're talking about like a paging device, then that would be supported if you can dial an extension to like an algo or a cyber data device. That will surely work.
And then Bill Smith asks, it seems that a reseller would need to know going in how promoting the Teams connector could impact their core value proposition to make sure buyers don't ditch the service for a complete Microsoft Teams environment. Again, I think this is one of the things we answered in there. This is bringing additional functionality to them, but also recognizing that you do have certain risk factors if you don't have a good rapport with your customer, or if your customer just doesn't need the full functionality of what you're selling. You need to weigh the pros and cons and evaluate which customers you're offering this to. How soon can we expect SMS, MMS functions to be available? Again, I think we answered that. We said it's coming, but we can't give you an exact date. With the user setup, we need one connector license for each user. Is that correct? So we set up a SIP trunk. Is it still one-to-one, or can we use one SIP trunk with multiple calling paths to support 10 users?
Yeah, so you need one phone system license for each individual user.
And then Anthony Goss says, even with a desk phone, yes, I think Corey said, and Mike has said, there are some desk phones available from Microsoft that already have built-in native team integration. So I think that's it. Mark Collick made a great comment. He says, Microsoft has literally wiped out everyone they have competed with. So why would SkySwitch not expect Microsoft to wipe out companies like SkySwitch and its resellers? That's not Microsoft's business model. Yes, they have a Trojan horse strategy to get more people using more Microsoft services, but Microsoft's not a phone company. They've tried it how many different times, even with Skype, and they've realized that's not the business that they're in. They're selling what I think really this is more of functionality for very specific use cases. What we're doing is we're bridging the gap between those use cases and giving resellers, one, something which is defensive, but also something which is applicable to more customers in order to give them the functionality they need. Also recognize that a large portion of our customer base that you resellers sell to are small to medium businesses, not enterprise. Microsoft focuses heavily on the enterprise and supports that. And that's where their focus is. You guys, your bread and butter is that small business, that, you know, that 5 to a couple hundred seat installations, and Microsoft doesn't support them the way you do. And the feature set of the Microsoft phone service is not as feature rich today as what you have from the SkySwitch platform. And that's what your customers are buying, all of this very business focused services that you deliver to them for the small business market. That is not what Microsoft's doing. They're building a one size fits all platform and then saying to others, go add on to it. So by you adding Teams, you give your customers that integration and that functionality that they need between your white label solution and the Microsoft Teams solution. Corey, is that a pretty good explanation, you think?
Yeah, and I think also kind of what Mark is referring to is the introduction of Office 365, when a lot of people were offering Exchange services and they kind of just came in and took business away. But I think this scenario is a bit different because in this case, they're already offering the service to their end customer, and we're kind of taking it back, or we can take those customers back from Microsoft, and there is always the risk of them introducing new functionality, but it doesn't look like the play. It's a decision that we had to make at SkySwitch when we started looking at finding a way to integrate with Teams. And we wanted to be able to give you guys the options to do the integration, but the choice is really up to you if you feel comfortable with it or not.
We've had some nice comments about from people saying what a nice webinar this was. This is a webinar which I'm really happy to have hosted, because I think we've got a lot out on the floor and a lot out in the open about the Teams connector. I encourage everybody, talk to your SkySwitch representative about pricing, go into support and work with Corey and his team to get the answers around the different use cases that you're being presented with, and also about your concerns so that we can help you overcome the objections or overcome the risks that your customers may be bringing you, largely because of what people don't know. Remember, a lot of the questions that you are asked by your customers are those who know not N-O not, but K-N-O-W not, what's going on and why they need or don't need the Teams connector. This, this is not, as Corey started out, this is not for everybody. This is not for every business. This is one that is for customers who have certain needs or certain desires, and our team is here to help you navigate those waters and deliver the most elegant, correct, and proper solution to the use case that they have or the problem that they're looking to solve. We're really good at solving your customers' problems for you. our support team that Corey leads so well. Corey and everyone else is here to help you do a better job at selling the solutions that your customers need. That's what's so great about the SkySwitch platform. We're not just selling a one-size-fits-all product. We're selling something which allows you to customize and easily deliver what your customers need. John Camillo says, will SkySwitch provide added focus on how to compete against Microsoft Teams or create a blogger forum so its resellers can share advice or info? That's a great idea. We'll take it up with the management team when the management team meets on a regular basis to see what we can do, because we know that there's a lot going on with Teams, and Micah is a big help to us because he's so deep into what Microsoft is doing and provides us that early warning insight so that we're able to develop the right product solution set around it. Any final comments, Micah? Corey?
No, I think it's great. It's great. Thank you for the questions, everyone.
Yeah, the questions have been wonderful, and I think people know where to reach me if they want to have a one-on-one.
One last comment. Someone says, this anonymous viewer. I love anonymous viewer. I don't believe the Microsoft Teams firmware-based phones are compatible with SkySwitch PBX. We don't sell those in the SkySwitch store.
Right. We do actually offer some of the Microsoft Teams phones in our store, but they're not SIP phones. So instead of having SIP functionality, they are direct integration with Microsoft Teams. So we make it clear that they're not compatible with our PBX. And you can do the opposite on like an Android phone, where you can install a Teams app and use the Android phone for calling. That is a SIP phone. You can install the Teams app, but you cannot do that with the Teams version of the phone. So you can't jump into a SkySwitch user. That I realize as I say that might be confusing, but you can use the Teams app. The Teams application on a Teams hard phone with the SkySwitch integration, but you can't do direct SIP connections.
Okay, well, that should answer that. Somebody said we're getting a lot of nice comments. Someone says, "Thank you, gentlemen. Our company is a Microsoft partner. We control the license for our clients. The solution is great in adding value." Thank you, Jerry Lumba. And thank you, Bill Smith, for telling us how great of a webinar we did. Fred Block says, so if I'm hearing correctly, the Teams phones are essentially Microsoft Teams on a phone, and it connects directly back to Microsoft. I don't completely.
That's correct. If they kind of bypass the SIP connection and go directly to Microsoft, so you can use Teams with whatever Teams routing you're using there.
Got it. All right, everybody. Well, this has been a great webinar. And again, I encourage all of our resellers, if you have questions, go to your SkySwitch sales representative, contact our support team, go into the knowledge base, and really dig into what your customers need when you come to us and say, here's what my customer is asking, or here's a situation I'm running into. Give us as much color and context, and we'll give you the right answers. With that, I want to thank everybody. Thank Erica Vasquez once again for pulling together this amazing webinar. And with that, I'm going to say hello, goodbye, and so long.